Hello, so I don't really do tag videos and I enjoy watching them, but I don't really do them because I never feel like I have interesting answers to all of the questions. Many of them aren't even applicable to my reading habits. However, I think tags are really great and they give context for who a reader is around the reviews, but I don't really feel like my channel provides that. So I thought I'd try and make a series of videos explaining a bit more about my taste in books, what I like and don't like, and some of my unpopular opinions. So this first video is about various things that I love in books. Firstly, I love a good pulpy conspiracy in a book. I don't really like them in real life very much, but in a book I think they're fun, especially the ones that almost descend to a level of camp in the level of ridiculousness, taken very seriously within the book itself. If done well, I'm fully on board for the ride, and I experienced this recently with While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. Next, I really enjoy historical women going insane. I put insane in quotation marks. The way women were treated for hysteria in the past. It's something that I find fascinating. You can see this in Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, and also my favourite short story, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I think I enjoy this because it plays with interpretations of womanhood and historical medicine and isolation, and I just enjoy it, I guess. Next is basically anything revolving around medicine and biology. I read quite a lot of those doctor memoirs. They all kind of bleed together in my mind, but I do really enjoy them. And a few years ago, I read a biology memoir, Lab Girl by Hope Yaron, which is fantastic. I really enjoy that. Similar to the historical women going insane, I really like when medicine and biology converge with historical women, maybe even sort of mildly relating to witchery. For example, I read Outlander many years ago, and I didn't really enjoy the book very much, but I loved the sections about this main character. I can't remember her name. I think it's Claire. She is a nurse, and so she goes back in time and she's treating people, and people sort of suspect her of witchcraft, and they were my favorite aspects of the book. If you have a recommendation that has anything like that, please do let me know. The rest of Outlander I didn't really enjoy, so I didn't continue with the series. Another example would be Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is one of my absolute favorites. It features a historical woman who becomes an expert on moss. Another that sort of incorporates the witchery sorcery vibe is The Lie Tree by Frances Hardinge. I really enjoyed this. It features a young female protagonist who is interested in science, so there's that aspect, and then also but there's some magical elements. Next is a scientific discovery plot structure. Now, to me, this is different than a mystery structure. A mystery is very much about having all the puzzle pieces and connecting them together and maybe even working it out before the person in the book does. But a scientific discovery is unsolvable by the reader. You're just following the protagonist or the main characters as they discover more about whatever it is that they're trying to understand. Some of my favorite examples would be the film Arrival. I have still yet to read the short story that it was based on, but that was one of my favorite aspects of that film. Another would be Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke. This is one of my favorite books, and it is not a perfect novel. Like there are very blank characters in this book, but to me that's okay because it's not a particularly long novel, and the strength of the plot saves it. Rama is the character of interest, and I just really enjoy it. For me, this is all about making a narrative out of the scientific method, and I just really enjoy it. On a complete side note, I'm okay if characters aren't great, if the plot is something that I'm enjoying, like Rendezvous with Rama. But if I flip that, I actually struggle to love a book when it's just about characters, with no plot at all. For example, earlier this year, I DNF'd Detransition Baby because it just felt so character-focused or too character-focused for my taste. But I will say, I'm only okay with no character if the plot is exactly to my taste, and I find it difficult to label myself as, a plot-driven reader because, well, firstly, there are plenty of plots that I don't care about. And secondly, I feel like the term plot-driven implies a certain kind of plot, lots of action, a thriller or whatever, which I don't necessarily mean. The truth is that overall, I prefer a balance between the two. I think sometimes there's this exaggerated binary between character and plot and what type of reader you are when really I want a good balance between the two. Next, I really enjoy atmospheric or kind of weird books. In fact, I can even deal with kind of less plot or the plot being put on the back burner for a while if it's supplemented with an atmosphere that I'm enjoying. Some examples of this would be Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood or The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins, although Mount Char definitely had plot as well as, weirdness. Next, I really like loneliness in books. I actually find it so interesting. We think of it as this kind of one-note experience, but there's actually many ways to be lonely. There's many reasons to be lonely. Someone could choose to be lonely. They could be forced into loneliness. They could be trying to get out of it. They could be perfectly comfortable, or they could be not trying to get out of it and also not comfortable. I just think it tells a lot about the character, and I don't know, I just really enjoy reading about it, although that might sound kind of perverse. An example of this that I enjoyed would be Severance by Ling Ma. The character in this book is very lonely. She doesn't really have much of a family, and she spends a lot of her time just with herself, and I really enjoyed it. The next one I'm not quite sure how to describe, and it's just day-by-day living, at least for a section of a book, maybe not for an entire book, because like I said, I do enjoy plot, but if a section of the book is just about someone's day-to-day life, maybe with a twist, maybe it's a post-apocalyptic setting, or they're trying to survive, or it's a different time period than I'm used to, or they have an interesting job or hobby. It's their day-to-day mundane existence, but it's actually very revealing to me. For example, the beginning section of Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, it's just Clara in the store observing things, and that was actually my favorite section of the book. That could have been longer for me. I was really enjoying it, even though that would actually make it a less well-paced book. These are just sections that I enjoy. Next, I really enjoy vices in books, like alcoholism, and I think it's because it's a combination of those previous two. There's a repetitive day-to-day action in a vice, and also it's often the cause of or the result of loneliness. So it kind of already hits those things that I enjoy. Plus, I don't really have any vices in my life. Like, I don't really drink very much and whatnot. So I don't know what that means. But an example of where I thought this was done well was Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. The main character in this is an alcoholic, and she goes on the train every day. So there's that, repetitive day-to-day observation and that alcoholism. I also just appreciated how much of a mess she was. She was really not in a good spot. She was very lonely. She didn't look very well. She didn't feel very well, and also her alcoholism was an integral part of the plot. It had a purpose in the story. And women aren't often allowed to be complete messes like that in books, and I really enjoyed it. Next is the Edwardian period, which for me, I'm defining that as 1900 to the beginning of the First World War. And in particular, I like this time period in New York City, and then even more specific than that, involving medicine. There are many examples of me loving things in this category, like The Alienist by Caleb Carr, or Ragtime by E.L. Doctorow, or the TV show The Nick, which is one of my favourite TV shows ever. I even think my teenage obsession with the film Titanic and the event of Titanic has a bit of responsibility here. A couple of years ago, I read the book The Midnight Watch, which is a sort of alternate perspective on the tragedy of Titanic, and one of the characters in that is a journalist in New York City, and so you get to follow this journalist in 1912 New York City, and they were my favorite sections of the book. I really enjoyed it. Next is dialogue. I love dialogue in books. I think it tells you so much about the character, the setting, the obviously it can move plot along, I also think that humor is sometimes best or most effectively done through dialogue. For example, right now I'm reading a Jane Austen novel, and she has tons of dialogue, and it really tells you all about these people. And I actually think that's why her books are can be so well adapted into movies and miniseries, because the dialogue's right there in the book. This is also definitely why I love plays so much. I love plays so much, and in particular, Oscar Wilde. He's so humorous in them. And in fact, I didn't really like The Picture of Dorian Gray that I read a couple of years ago. For me, it read very tedious. I didn't really like those witticisms to be stretched out to fill, a novel. I think his humor and his storytelling does better within the format of a play. Next is that I love interdisciplinary nonfiction. What I mean is when a nonfiction book pulls things from lots of different areas of life and seamlessly weaves them together to express something greater than the sum of its parts. An example of this would be The Library Book by Susan Orlean. I loved this. It explores a massive fire that happened at the LA Public Library, but then it also just talks about how libraries work in general, the history of libraries in LA, and firefighters, and what it's like to fight a fire so big and so hot and so inaccessible, and then the various theories of who set the fire and why they might have done so, and so on. It pulls all of these together into a wonderful reading experience. So they are some of the things that I love in books, at least, me being the reader I am right now. Please let me know if you have any book recommendations for me based on these preferences. Thank you for watching.